Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Like I said, we're just going to have a very informal chat. The purpose of this event was a few months ago, we were really fortunate to have some of our speakers here today join us in a round table. And what we did, we were virtually, thankfully, through the summer, we did a round table and we discussed what does the future of learning look like? The purpose of it being, you know, so much happened in the past 12 to 18 months. Things have changed from a working perspective. Technology has advanced, but has the way that we learn and the way that we develop our skills, has that advanced as well? And it was really a set of questions as to how far has that come? Have we actually managed to achieve it? Do we have a hybrid system now? Are we fully virtual? Do we want to go back to non-virtual when this COVID thing is over, if it's ever going to be over? And it was just a really nice discussion to find out what some experts in that learning and development field believe is going to be what the future of learning is. So out of that came a report which Chris and Joss and Andrew contributed to, which was brilliant. And what we'll do after here is we'll send you an email with the report into it. You can have to see it in more detail. But we thought what we might do is just get some of the guys from that roundtable together just to really explain some of the thinking behind what the answers were to the questions. So we have Graham Kelly, who is director of BIM Academy. He's going to chair the discussion this afternoon. He's got a few questions that he's going to pose to our panel based on what the findings from that, the report from the roundtable was. So just before we kick off, you're probably wondering who I am. We should have explained that in the first place. I'm Marie Grieve. I'm the marketing consultancy that supports BIM Academy, and we do all of the comms to allow BIM Academy to tell their stories about learning and development. So I'm quickly going to pass over to Graham. He will then introduce our speakers. Like I say, if you've got any comments that you'd like to put forward to us, please put them in the chat. We'll field some questions a little bit later on. And for the moment, please keep your microphones off and your cameras off, but we can switch them on later and have one big discussion. So Graham, over to you.
Thanks, Marie. Can everyone hear me okay? Cool. Yeah, as Marie said, we released the Future Learning Report a couple of months ago. We had a fantastic chat with 12 people, learning professionals, if you like, in that time, which went brilliantly. It was really positive in terms of trying to work out what the future of learning really is and how we move forward with that. And really, it was we brought a few of those guys back today just to reflect on that report and a few more, dig into a few more of those questions as we move forward. So today we've got Joss Underwood, who's director at Field 19. She successfully delivered a number of high-profile projects, both for creative and construction organisations. And so MIF in Manchester, Lang O'Rourke, the Chamber of Commerce of Manchester and the Council of Manchester. Currently a director of two businesses, providing consultancy in training, organisational development, bid leadership, and a new pop-up that's looking at well-being and learning, but very much around that sort of learning is the key there. We've got Chris Bartley, who's founder of Evolve 8 Coaching. Chris is a chemist by background, PhD chemist by background, and has got 20 years of R&D experience, both in the UK and Asia, but has moved back to follow his passion around coaching and learning and how we make learning effective and fun for people, so that we've got happy, productive people working in organisations. Then we've got Andrew Johnson, who is leading all of BIM Academy's learning and development, currently going through a huge transformation of what we do, and one of the key elements of that future learning report was really for us to work out how to best deliver training and elements for organisations out there. Mentioned before, joining us, Andrew was in the Royal Engineers for 24 years, leaving as a senior soldier, and there was a huge amount of sort of learning and training involved in the sort of latter part of Andrew's career as well. So some fantastic sort of minds around training and learning in the room, and I think the key to the report and the questions today is just really how do we get the best out of our experience, if you like, with regards to training and when we sit on training, because I'm sure we've all been there where it doesn't quite click, and even more so perhaps in the last 18 months where we've almost exclusively had to do this virtually. So I suppose the first question, which I'm going to pose to Andrew first, and then we'll move across the digital room, if you like. You know, there's an awful lot of pressure on employees at the moment to be diverse and adaptable and pick up new skills, and perhaps even more so in the last 18 months. And developing and maintaining those skills is also very, very difficult. And there's a huge wealth of knowledge out there, but I question how effective it is. So I think the first one is can you sort of talk through what you think is effective training, and you know, how we can impact on the learner, if you like.
Yeah, thanks very much, Graham. Yeah, like probably similar to BIM, effective training should have a framework, and probably using a very similar framework as BIM. It's all about people, process, and then the support and technology that does support it, and that's through the whole process. So let's start about people. So we're focusing on creating a program for employers, but also employees, because it is about the learner, and then building that systematic, step-by-step process that helps evaluate all throughout. It's not just evaluation at the end, it's actually throughout. At BIM Academy, we use a systematic approach to training. And this is what I used in the military, and I brought the BIM Academy, and we do this throughout all our training. It's very similar to BIM, so information management process that we use in the built environment. It's all about getting the evidence, really, and that's the future of learning. And it has four simple stages. First of all, you have the needs analysis, and that's linked very much to BIM, because the first stage in BIM is assessment and need. And this is all about getting the requirements, the scoping exercises, through steering groups, through surveys, and that's through individual and as a collective. So you can see there, it's all about effective communication. And then it's about the training needs, evaluation, and then creating that whole training solution. After that, you've got the design. So it's setting the training objectives, and that's looking at performance, it's looking at conditions, and also the standards that you want to achieve. And then the assessment strategy, because you could want it formative and summative. But also it must have enabling objectives and followed by key learning points. And this is a really key area that I have brought into the training, that don't waste this at the end, get it right from the start. And then it comes to delivery. And this is where the technology can really support, and we'll probably talk about this more, but it's all about the programming, the scheduling, and the resourcing. And again, the technology can really support that. But it's also looking at the training deficiencies as well, shortfalls, competences, and also training gaps, which we're seeing in industry. And then lastly, it comes to assurance. And like anything that's similar on a building project, it is about continuous improvement. Is it cost effective? Is the training delivery good? Could it be improved? And also, are there any recommendations? So that's when it brings it all together into this process. And you can think of the process as well as another framework that can be also the 4 Rs, which is require, resourced, then referred, and reflection. So you can see there, it brings it all together for the learner, and it's really focused. So if you evaluate right from the start and all the way through to the end, then you should have a very, very happy and a learner that has got all of this effectiveness and absorbed it all.
Brilliant, thanks, Andrew. Chris, do you have any further thoughts on that effective learning?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Graham. So, hi everyone. I'm Chris. As you may hear, English is not my native language, right? I am Scottish and I have the flu. So I do apologise if you cannot hear me properly, but hopefully, if I enunciate well, it will be clear. So I think this is a great question. What is effective training? And I think it's a great question because I know and believe that so many organisations get it wrong. And they get it wrong because, not because anything they're doing that intentionally, there is so much possible. So the what's possible in training is absolutely enormous on what's possible. You could be trained on just about anything, but that doesn't mean it's effective training. And I'm going to talk about what's possible a bit later on. I want to focus on the other really important theme, and that's what's needed. And for me, that's when you really get clear on what effective training is. If you get clear on what is needed to improve your people and to improve your business, you can identify where effective training sits. And I think you need a bit more granularity than that. When I talk about people and improving people, I'm talking about capability and I'm talking about culture. And when I talk about improving your business, I'm talking about three things: what you deliver to the client, what you deliver to society, and what you deliver to your key financials, your bottom line, your top line, etc. So if you get really clear on what's needed to improve your people and business and identify training that lines up perfectly with that, that's when you've got a fantastic chance of having effective training, because you're really getting clear on what you need for your people and business. Now, there's a whole other discussion we'll have later about how do you do that and how do you train, but first get really clear on what training makes sense for you. Now, that's one really important piece, but then the measurement of that is critical. So people often say, well, how do you know if it has a real impact? How you get this training and you do it with your folks? And for me, there's two magical ingredients. One is the people who go through the training, the employees, the participants. You assess what they tell you about the training. And we do that in every training that we do. We're very happy to get very high ratings because we think a lot before we train, but you have to ask folks, did this really give you the value to understand if it met the need? And the second really important measure is managers. Managers need to be accountable for tracking and assessing the impact on the people and business of that training. So if you want effective training, to summarize, the way I think about it, really simplistic, and I share this not to act like a guru, and Josh, myself, Andrew are not gurus. We have some know-how, just like you will have on the call, and we're just sharing as food for thought. So the food for thought I'd love you to take away about effective training is get really clear on what could improve your people and business, because that's when you've got a great chance of putting effective training in place. And then make sure you measure it. You really measure it in terms of the people's response and the management assessing the impact it's had. So some food for thought as we carry on. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Chris. Joss, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think maybe I come from a slightly different perspective in terms of a lot of my experience of delivering training has been with predominantly younger people who sort of find themselves in a situation where they're struggling to get into employment, and that could be for lots of different reasons. And so we really took an approach which was we need to focus on the individual impact for every learner. So if we're creating a system, a framework of learning, how do we ensure that the impact is correct for individuals? And I think really the effectiveness of the training is when that learner comes to the end of that, are they then able to articulate, this is the process that I went through, these are the skills that I now have, and this is how I can apply that in my job, in my life, in my application form, whatever it is really. So I think it's absolutely about impact, but individual impact, and how do I take that on, and how do I learn and continue to learn. I think that would be the other thing around effective training, is that you almost inspire people to want to continue learning, because if you run a training program and you come out of it and think, oh, that's not for me, I think that's really important, is can we get people to understand the importance and the value of learning holistically and owning that personally.
And I suppose just to touch on that individual impact, is there any sort of techniques that you use to sort of make sure that I know Andrew and Chris talked about sort of measuring that impact throughout, but on an individual level, is there anything?
Well, we would do like sort of initial assessments with everybody. So where are they at in terms of confidence? What do they want to get out of it, the course, and actually put sort of objectives in place that were unique to each individual. Some were similar. So you could almost say, as a given, everybody wanted to improve in confidence. Everybody wanted to learn to better use technology, and that was a key one, particularly over the last 12 months. So so we would do always an initial assessment. What do you want to get out of it? And then at the end, an assessment of, okay, this is what we said that you wanted to achieve. Do you feel we've done that? And how are you going to take this forward? So there's a structure to it, and that doesn't need to change every time. Andrew talked really well around putting that framework in place, and you have to have that framework, and you have to have something, as Chris said, to measure and assess. And I suppose when working with young people that are sort of lower in confidence, it's really important that you are working with them on things that they are going to be able to achieve as well.
Fantastic. I think we'll move on slightly, I suppose. If we reflect on the last 18 months and the fact that we've all been sort of locked away to an extent, how do you think the method of effective training has changed, Chris, in the last 18 months?
It's interesting, Graham, because I think on one hand, and I'll explain my comment, you could say absolutely nothing has changed in terms of what effective training is, nothing. And everything has changed, yeah? And if I explain that, so the what is effective training has not changed, right? The what is effective training is, to use my words, but you'll have your own version of those words, how do you improve your people in your business, right? So from your capability, culture of people, your impact on customers, impact on society, bottom line financials, all that stuff is still absolutely what constitutes effective training, right? So the what is the same. However, there are some obviously big subtleties, like there's more hybrid working. So we have to put that into that umbrella and see where does that fit with our people to get the best from our people. Do we need to do something on hybrid working, for example? But the what is fundamentally the same. What has dramatically changed is the how. We've moved predominantly from face-to-face training, where you're in a room and a trainer's with you, in many cases, to virtually, virtual training being the predominant way training is delivered for very good reason in the short to mid-term. Now, if I stop and think, well, okay, is that the way we're going to go? Are we going to go to this effective training that's done virtually? I would ask you all a question, and I would say to you, is it better meeting your family and friends in person, or is it better meeting them online? Right, so think about that for a minute. Is it better to meet your family and friends online, or is it better to meet them in person? Now, I'm sure every one of you, unless maybe you have a mother-in-law or father-in-law, you might say it's better to meet them in person, right? And training is no different. There are some unique dynamics that happen when you're in a room, and in terms of both what the trainer delivers and how the people interact with the content and how engaged they are. There's many dynamics at play. So what I would say about the how is, if you can have face-to-face training, it will continue to have great value, but equally so if you go to virtual training, because that is having to be in place, and for global organizations, it's always been in play. You have to really think very carefully about how you deliver content and structure content and hit learning outcomes, because it is very different from being in a room, very different. So again, to summarize, just always focus on the what's needed. That's not changed in effective training, but the how, when you're doing it virtually, if you meet a trainer who says, oh, virtual training is just the same as being in the room, it's just as easy, I don't have any problem, it's the same thing, I wouldn't touch that trainer with a barge pole, yeah? Trainers have to understand, and the good ones do, that it is incredibly different delivering training virtually, yeah? And I know that I have delivered some trainings early on that were not as good if I had as if I had been in the room, and I've tried to adapt and modify and talk to other trainers. So I think it's a great question, and I'd love to see what some of the other folks think.
Yeah, just Josh, I was interested from your perspective. Obviously, you're working with younger people who might be slightly more tech savvy, although they might be. We explored in the report actually the fact that some people still don't have access to good technology in order to work this. So I just wondered from your perspective, has that effective training been? Has it changed? Has it been sort of molded based on what your experience is?
Yeah, It has, because I think we were launching a training program just before we went into lockdown, actually, and we had to quite quickly change it from being an in-person delivery to online. What it changes is the way that you engage people. So like we talked in the round table as well around, how do you know that someone is engaged? Like, it's very difficult from a perspective of, you know, leading a session to know whether the people behind the cameras, if they have their cameras switched on. And that's the other thing, you know, like, so for which is really hard. You can't see facial expressions. You don't know if they're listening. You don't even know if they're there. So I think we learned quite early on that we had to say to people that we would really appreciate if you could switch your camera on. It just helps us to know if you're here. And you know, and actually, as Chris was saying, as somebody who delivers learning, if you stand in a room and deliver learning, you can see people nodding, you can see who gets it. So it's hard from a tutor perspective to do that level of assessment and see actually who needs a bit more help and support here. So we did tweak our the tasks that we gave people. We did a lot of peer-to-peer breakout sessions where we would then, as a tutor, drop in and go, right, how are they chatting about this? Do they understand it? But we did have to think creatively about how, as a tutor, a deliverer of learning, we were able to pick that up. And then we had to increase as well the number of one-to-ones that we did with people. So I would say that the process and the program of delivery, we did tweak as we went along to ensure that it was effective.
Fantastic. Andrew, I just wondered if you wanted to touch on some of the work that we've done in trying to understand blended learning, you know, the mix between the two, just to add to what the guys have been saying there.
Yeah, fantastic, both the comments there. I'd definitely say being adaptable is key. On blended learning, yesterday was my first face-to-face in the classroom again with it, and I was excited. As Chris said, it's probably one of the best thing ever. Yeah. You get them people to people in the break time, in the breaks, you start learning more, and then you can change your training slightly, because then you can find a bit more, because virtual, you generally don't get there. People go for a cup of coffee or they turn the cameras off on mute. So I went there. Just a bit on the blended learning, we've created like a hybrid approach to the delivery, and that got tested yesterday. So when I went in there, one person was coming in, emailed and said, I've got to self-isolate, but I need to do the training. So I was like, yeah, okay, we've got Zoom. So set up, and I stole one of the survey tripods. I put the laptop on there, set it all up, had it in front of me, got the TV, and I was like that. Hello there, can you hear me? Yeah, good. Everyone here? And we've done it a hybrid approach, and it was fantastic. It was received well. Okay, there was and with all the little training aids and so on that make it personal, and she didn't. But we had all the digital tools, so we had the whiteboard going on. So even at the end, the feedback was just like, I really feel included there, even though it was in a house by herself and not in a group, but was all part of the group. So I definitely think the blended learning is definitely the way ahead. And I think we will always approach it. We'll always have it in our back pocket, because the circumstances can change just like that, as I was tested yesterday. But the training delivery can be exactly the same as what it can be face-to-face and virtual, and they still get the same learning outcomes. But yeah, we definitely do adopt that. The program that we generally do, and we're doing at the moment, is 80% virtual, and that's to save on travel, because it's all good for the environment and so on like that. But also as well, we're trying to fit the training around their needs. So they want to pick up kids from school and so on. So we finished the time. So we even changed the timings yesterday to suit everybody. So it is all about, and our training is focused on the learner and actually delivering the best we can for each individual in their situation.
I think the other thing that struck me, actually, just on some of the stuff Andrew's been doing at BIM Academy, is with the platform that we've produced, sort of digital platform, if you like, uploading all of that information back onto the LMS on the platform that we've got, so that people can reflect on their courses, has actually been a huge positive as well with regards to this blended learning. You know, there's that sort of less sort of sit in the classroom, take notes, and then reflect on them. That you have to have that opportunity to sort of see or look back on what's been done. So I think that that's really helped with our sort of communication, if you like. But I do worry, sort of if we did go sort of fully virtual, or it's about how do we maintain that sort of communication skills and that integration of people. And so Joss, I know you touched upon it already, but it was just really just further thoughts on how we don't lose those common skills. You know, when people don't put the cameras on, you know, how do we read people? You know, how do we make it effective still with that virtual approach?
I think, well, firstly, you know, communicating like this is another way to communicate, isn't it? And I think, you know, 2 years ago, perhaps a lot of us here weren't very adept at communicating in this way. So there's been a huge amount of learning that we've all done and have had to adapt. And as Andrew said, you know, being able to adapt currently and will continue is one of the critical skills we all have to have and embed through our learning, I think. So I think it's another way to communicate, but it also brings its own set of challenges. And cameras being on is one of them. It's not just about what I can see here, though. It's about how do we create rooms and you know, the use of breakout rooms. And I said that before is actually really important, because you get people in smaller groups. People that might not contribute in the main room would contribute in the smaller room. But then what we have seen happening as well through the learning programs that we've been delivering is that people get really into like the chat function. So in terms of communicating around, this is the content that's available for as in resources, that's been fantastic. So people have really used Microsoft Teams so that's been a real positive. And I do think there have been other benefits. So attendance was fantastic in terms of our virtual delivery. So we had people from across Greater Manchester, which I don't think we'd usually get. But because there was no travel involved, they were able to, you know, switch on the tech and be there. So no travel time, no money needed to spend on travel, and also sort of greater accessibility for people. So where, and you mentioned this before, Graham, around access to technology, where we knew that there was a gap for people, we sent them an iPad. So basically we sort of had, you know, had a SIM card in, and it had everything preloaded. So all of the systems that they needed to be able to access, and they all had like a one-to-one IT to ensure that it was accessible. We didn't have anyone falling off the edge because they didn't. But you know, so there was a cost to that doing that, but actually it was fundamentally important to ensure that we were making ourselves, we were being inclusive. So I think it is, although you do lose that in-person communication, it's almost more difficult to learn to communicate in this way. So if you can do it in this way, yeah. I don't know about you, but I think, you know, when we first went to this, everyone, you know, you'd be in that situation where if you're in a meeting room, you can see when someone has sort of finished speaking, you know, coming to an end. And I think whether we've all had to learn to be a bit more patient and to listen more effectively, because we're not getting the body language as much, not, you know, not at all. But so in lots of ways, it may have improved our in-person communication, because we have to wait and hold and be a little bit more listening.
Brilliant. And Chris, after being in a number of your workshops in person, I think one of the things that struck me was that you know, you attempt to create memories of that day through, you know, little things like bringing Freddos and less sugary snacks into the room. So that, and always in the feedback, people say, no one's ever bought me sweets before, you know. And people remember that day because of that, but also there's the story side of thing. And has it really impacted your way of communicating by having to do a lot of this virtually? And I don't know how you've adapted.
No, it definitely has. I mean, I am very aware that the impact I can have in a positive way is diminished when you're virtual, right, compared to what you can do in a room. But that doesn't mean you still can't be impactful, as long as, you know, you're clear on the training objective and you've really thought about how to structure the content. Because what I realized is sort of expanded content when I was in a room, I could manage. And as Josh said really well, you can see people's eyes, you know who's into it, the people that aren't, you can bring them with you. You can't really do that virtually. It's much harder. So you do have to adapt how you go about it and how you work. The interesting one for me is we all look at this as this is new, right? Because for many of us, it is new, the way we're working. But if you look at, I spent 20 years in a global, mature corporate organization, and all my teams were always dispersed around the world. And in that context, most of my working life was virtual. So I was always online in mornings, evenings, whatever, depending where folks were in the world. That was how we had to work. So you find ways to do it effectively. However, we recognized even in those types of organizations, there is nothing to beat face-to-face. So we planned in every quarter, we would meet face-to-face, whatever it may be. Now, so I would always say to folks, if you can meet in a room, do it. We did some training recently with Galliford Try and we're all in a room, right? And it was just great. You know, it was fantastic in a room. Equally so, we did some training with Ryder Architects where we weren't in a room because it was at a different point in time where we couldn't be, but we still also worked really hard to do it virtually. And I think as a trainer, you just have to really be thinking, right, what went well there and what wasn't so good, and really reflecting and asking the questions of your client and just keep adapting and changing and try and find those ways. And Josh mentioned it, to engage people and get them interested. And it is challenging. And folks, having spent 20 years in a global organization, the facts are virtual will never be as good as in a room. That's a fact, right? In my belief, right? But it can be really, really good doing it virtually, right? You just have to think a lot about how you do it. So it's definitely different.
Brilliant. And Josh, one of the things you talked a lot about and we're very passionate about on the day when we did the analysis of the report was co-creation, and how we create content for the learner. I wondered whether you could talk a little bit more about that process of how you co-create courses.
Yeah, definitely. We have, in fact, all of our courses were co-created. So with industry practitioners and specialists. So one of them, we ran an apprenticeship program for venue technicians in Manchester, and we brought venue technicians into the room and said, "This is the curriculum. Look, have a look at it. What do you think? Does it fit what you do?" The standard is the standard, so there was no changing that. But it was about how do you bring that to life with the people that do the job. And it was quite a revelationary meeting, I'd say. And we came out of it on that first workshop with an option. It was either we go with the existing curriculum or we rip it up and we start again. And the technician said, "Nah, let's rewrite it," which was like, oh, really? But we worked with them for, it was nearly 200 hours of technician time that went into it, alongside teachers and other industry specialists. And what we created was a curriculum that felt like it worked better, in that it sort of built upon different skills, and it also it sort of utilized the resource that we had more effectively. So because we were asking not just the technicians to co-produce, we wanted them to deliver as well. So in conjunction with trained teachers and tutors, the industry practitioners not only shaped the curriculum, they also then delivered it. It's a totally different experience for learners when you have people that do that job in the here and now, teaching them on that piece of equipment. we also put together a sort of very entry level, I suppose, academy program, which was the one I spoke about earlier, which was around building confidence and self-esteem. Really were the main things. But then within that, we did a whole host of content around storytelling. How do you tell your personal narrative? Things around leadership, psychology, mindfulness. And all of this was wrapped into their own project. So they were given a project to do as part of the development. And that was the key thing, really. So it was giving them experiential learning, because they had to develop the project. They had to write a press release. They had to do, here's a plan, here's a budget, here's all that, working as a team. So again, it was very much, we were facilitating and then sort of putting these nice things around it and within it, so that they could come out of that going, okay, I understand leadership a bit better now. I understand that actually I can be a leader, and you know, that sort of thing. So I think, and we did that with you know, experts in psychology, military experts and trainers, and like you were saying before, Andrew, that sort of structure is so important. But I think if you spoke to one of our learners, it felt like quite a fluid process rather than it, you know, as it should. So I think if you bring in, and it's sometimes harder, I would say, it's not the easy route, because you have more minds in the room going, well, I think this, well, what about that? But it's absolutely worthwhile. Absolutely.
Brilliant, thank you. And I guess that touched on the point that so we've been looking at BIM Academy, which is, it's how do you bring, you know, case studies into our training, and how do you, you know, feed back that industry expertise. Andrew, I don't know whether you want to talk a little bit about how you found that, how have you gone about sort of bringing some of that expertise into the courses that we're putting on at the moment?
Yeah, we did reach out to the industry, and the industry, even from working in previous companies, it was always about like, well, what's real? I want to know, okay, this BIM, but what's real about it? And the only way we can do that is, as Graham's mentioned there, is in case studies of lessons learned, but also actually where it can go wrong, but also best practice. And as Graham's mentioned there, we've got, with BIM Academy's got good 10 years of experience with lots of lessons learned and best practice. So we've put that into all of our training, and we have actually made it real. So when you're actually going through and you're doing the training, we can talk about, yes, the frameworks and the process, but this is actually what it can do. And even yesterday, I had someone that straight away in the training, I don't buy into this BIM. And I was just like, oh, really? Well, here's a challenge. So from then, in the end, he was just all for, and this was even just a fundamentals course. He was like, right, I'm definitely going for this. Like, you really sold me on this. So then I walked away, I was like, yes, tick, that's done. But for me, it definitely is. And we will always will. And even industry now is seeing our training. And this isn't just national, as in the UK, we're really pushing out globally as well. And this is where I do think going digital and virtual helps us do that. So we can reach a market out of the UK and deliver this training and show them all of these case studies, these best practice, and actually how they can achieve it in implementing BIM. But as Graham mentioned there, we're actually moving our training a bit further and wider, where it doesn't just specialize in BIM and information management. We're looking at areas to even bring in, so looking at soft skills and also hard skills as well.
Brilliant, thanks, Andrew. Chris, just on that, I think it's quite interesting, because obviously you're not it's not focused on, your training and coaching is not focused on construction. It's much wider. And I suppose it's, how do you bring in that experience from all sorts of different areas to sort of get your messages across?
So I think there's two things. I think, Graham, I love what Josh said about that co-creation example with the event technicians, because, for example, Graham, you'll know when we worked with Amy Consultancy, we would have flopped in that training session had we not spent hours and hours with those managers doing pre-interviews, right? Because it gave us the context of what was relevant to them, and then we took that to the training. So I think that co-creation thing up front is absolutely critical, yeah? I think, to answer your question a bit more specifically as well about what do you bring to people, the human brain is wired such that we love novelty. We love to know new things and novel and interesting things. When we do, we can't switch off. So as a trainer, I spend a lot of time thinking and finding, as you know, stories and which are true and factual about different sectors, different walks of life, people who've achieved, people who've overcome challenge, because they're the things that people often connect with. And once you've got the brain alive and working, then people are receptive to content, and even receptive to BIM content, Andrew, right? Which of course I love, right? Because Graham's converted me. But it is true. So I really think about us as human beings. You want to be interested, so find ways to interest people, and that can happen in whatever topic you're talking about, whether it's event technicians, digital, you name it. I think that's such a powerful motivator, and that's how TED talks are all structured, so that you can't switch off, right? Your brain's on and they've got you, and then you're open to learning.
Brilliant. Just flipping back to technology, Chris, you said technology is powerful but dangerous. So it's just, and it's always about what's needed and what's possible, and that sort of blend between the two. So we need to use technology. We've already discussed that, but how do we sort of merge the two, and how do we, keep it effective or keep it?
So you're right. I did say in the session we had the round table, technology is awesome or amazing, but it's also dangerous, right? And it really is, right? It's both things. And the reason I say that is when I talked earlier about what's needed as a concept, but then there's what's possible. Technology makes so many things possible, right? So technology can be sexy, alluring, appealing. Oh God, I mean, there's virtually whatever you're doing in whatever aspect of your job in any sector, you could find tech that could help you do that, right? So it's very easy to get hypnotized by that, and this is the dangerous bit, and say, right, let's use technology to do X or Y, right? Now, what I would say is that, and you'll see in many organizations, they spend a lot of time, effort, money on technology, and some of it works, and a lot of it doesn't really work, or it isn't as effective as they thought it might be. And I think the reason that happens, and I say this because I came from a company with a 180-year history, so they educated me to all the mistakes they had made as I was growing up as a young manager. One of the key things is getting really focused on what's needed, first and foremost. What do you need to improve your people and your business? And over here's the what's possible, right? And ignore what's possible for a moment, and only when they come together, where there's an intersection, I'm not getting my wee diagram, but imagine two circles where they intersect, where the what's needed that you need for people in business intersects with what's possible. So the technology, use technology, but don't use every bit of tech that looks cool and funky. So that's why I said it's dangerous, right? Because people are super smart, and many of the things we do in processes, people can do them, yeah? And we don't need tech to do them, but some things, tech is just awesome, right? Off the planet good, as long as it lines up with what's needed, yeah? So that was the context of it's dangerous, but it is also awesome.
Brilliant, thank you. I suppose just a question to Andrew was what technology do you think is needed to facilitate our training, the training that we do?
It's quite a funny one, actually. And my prelims for delivering face-to-face yesterday, one of my first don't eat, don't drink, fire exits over there is mobile phones will be used, but when you're not, please put them away. Because as you said there, Chris, and that's where it is. I'm delivering training. I don't want somebody getting the mobile phone out and getting in an infinity pool and just suddenly getting sucked into the phone. So I think that's a must. So that's where we use technology for tools, for doing polls and so on. Because I think, as Josh said, a lot of people can be a bit nervous about the training. So we use a tool called Menti to do polls, questions, Q&A, and they can do that on the phones and put answers up there. And I don't know who's asked that question and so on. So we've got that. So we use tools like that. Also, we've got, you mentioned about the learning management system. Fantastic. We can just drop all the resources in there. The same as the training yesterday. So I recorded 6 hours of Zoom and I've got the job of this afternoon breaking it all down into every single module and putting it on there. But then for the students to then reflect, because 6 hours, you're like, are we done yet? They can go onto it today, and for even for the next 12 months and go on there and just like, refresher. Oh, that's what he was waffling on about. Oh, okay, the information's there. So we can do virtual. We can put any resources, so links, external links out. And also we can put any documents we think that can help, because we're really trying to move away from the whole paper-based workbooks. There you go, there's your workbook for the training. It's about 60 pages each, and we've got 12 people on the course. So we're making it all digital now. So you can see where the technology is really helping the planet as well, where we can really support it there.
Brilliant, thanks, Andrew. I suppose just to finish off, and I'll come to Josh first. Is kind of what's next. Hopefully we're sort of coming slowly out of where we're at. What is the future of learning for you? You know, what's next with what we do? Is it all about people? Is it all about content? Is it technology? Is it, you know, a combination of all three? What's next?
Yeah, well, yes, it is a combination of all three, definitely. I think the most important thing that we all need to be able to do is shift and adapt, and so however programs are created, and you know, as I've spoken about already, I do think things need to be co-produced more. I think the what young people expect in the workplace and what the leadership expect in workplaces is sometimes quite different, and so the more that you can do around co-creation, not just around whatever the skill set is itself, but within organizations as well, and organizations taking the leadership around, well, this is what we need to be able to do, or is it what we need to be able to do? So I think it comes back to relevance, but fundamentally I think what's most important in whatever we do in the future is we've got to embed in organizations and everywhere a culture of continuous learning. You know, and for an individual to be able to, if they're not getting what they think they want or need through their personal development, enabling them to recognize where those gaps are, and where to go to get them. I think because nothing is more empowering than actually being able to go, oh, there's a gap here. Where do I go to get it? Because if we've got that commitment to personal learning, it goes far beyond, you know, one-off training programs.
Brilliant, thank you. And Chris, your thoughts on what's next? What's the future?
Yeah, so the future, what I'm going to say might not surprise you. I think the future is to get really clear in terms of training on what's needed to improve your people and your business. And by your people, and I'm repeating myself quite intentionally, by your people, I mean the capability and culture that you want and need. And by business, I mean, what do you deliver to your client? What do you deliver to society? And what do you deliver on your key financial metrics, top, bottom line, etc. So I think getting really clear on that. And once you are working out what's the content you need, what's the technology you need to do those things, but everything for me needs to be in service of what's needed to improve your people in business, because that's what really matters, right? It is about our people in our business and the wider society. And I think often we get mixed up because of the so many things that are possible. I would say forget about what's possible first and focus on what's really needed. So that's what I think the future should look like. And I think that lens or clarity of thinking allows you to really focus and make a difference to your people in business. And that's ultimately what it's about. Training and management.
Fantastic. And Andrew, your thoughts?
Clearly, we need to get a box of Freddos, Graham, because that's your memory. So, no, joking aside there, it's about making memories. And that's what it is. Your memory of good training and so on from when you had it with Chris and so on is, and it's all about the delivery. In the military, they made training programs, and you presented a training program. Every instructor had the same training program, but there was always one instructor you were like, wow, and give you that fact that he's delivered it well, he's really engaged. And this is what I'm trying to bring into the industry as well through with BIM Academy, is to give that wow factor. So like in the room face to face yesterday, I had some people that were all different ages and so on, it's really engaging and trying to engage, but it's learning and it's a skill, and you'll probably all know this as well, is when you go virtual and not having that, it's like, how do you get them? How do you pull them in and get them on that virtual? So it's all on the delivery and all making memories for me, because we've got all the program and it's good. We've got the case studies. Now it's just delivering it very, very well to the industry and globally as well.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Marie, as Marie put into the chat, if anyone's got any questions, now would be the time to raise a hand or drop it into that chat. I think that was fantastic, guys, from what you've said. I think if I was to summarize what's really interesting, we're in a world where, there's a lot of material out there, a lot of content out there. A lot of big businesses are paying for organizations to drop all this online training, and people can go on when they want, but actually none of that's effective. It's not co-created. It's not necessarily what people want. It's not necessarily giving people the ability to continuously learn. And I think sometimes we forget that as organizations, that we've got to go back to people and culture, really, in terms of and specifying training based on that. So I think that's certainly something that will be taken into future of what we're doing, and trying to build a community of learners, within that space. I think adaptability, flexibility, change are inevitable words at the moment. I think we're seeing even in the last few days that the world does change very rapidly, and we do need to flex and adapt to that. And I think the best trainers out there are the ones that really, really think about how they deliver effective training in different mediums. So that was fantastic, the way that came through. And then the other things I picked up were, got to understand what people need. You've got to get feedback throughout the training to understand what people are doing, and you've got to measure that impact at the end as well. I don't think we've got any questions, Marie, so I think we can wrap up.
We don't, but I have a question.
Wait a minute.
Something's just come in. Yeah. So it says,
always rely on Ben to drop a question in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll read it out. How could you ensure training stays effective as you increase rollout size? So as you get larger and larger, making it more difficult to assess on an individual level. Josh, do you want to have a first stab at that?
Yeah, I think sort of as we started the conversation, we talked about having the sort of the right framework around things, being really clear about where your assessment points are, and all of that. But what is most important for me is the individual assessment as well. So making sure that you've got time at the beginning and the end to actually put some unique objectives in place for individual people, and it does take time to do that. And I suppose if you're rolling that out globally, it's about having the resource to make sure that you've got the time to do it, and there are ways and means of doing that. You could get people to think about it and do that in different ways, but I think as long as you've got the framework there, the right delivery partners, and you are still taking as sort of individual view on it as possible, then in short, that's what I'd say.
Brilliant. Andrew, any thoughts on sort of scaling up a training rollout?
On the rollout itself, I'm seeing there on Ben's he's on about the size, and we try and keep it at a maximum of 12. That's within virtual and also as well on a classroom size. I know there is the scope. Well, yes, you could push it out to hundreds and do it virtually like that. You're not going to get everyone engaged. It can't be personal then. So I think with 12, a good number like that, you create them breakout rooms. You've got small numbers within the breakout rooms. They will get to know each other, and it'll add huge and a lot more value. Also, as well, he said there about rolling it out to multiple countries as well. Planning is great, and you can roll that out. Delivery, and I would say if you're moving it to another country and just say you need translation, maybe the time needs to double or even treble. And I've worked in organisations where they fell foul for that, and they've gone out there and just like, well, it's an hour's worth of training. They've only got about a quarter of the way through, and it's 2 hours already. So I do think you've got to think about the timings on there on delivery. And also as well, understanding, because you have different cultures, different languages, you maybe need to slow it down. And that's where the time increases it down as well.
Yeah, I think we've got first-hand experience of that. We rolled out a big training program for a government client in the Middle East, and we were still insistent on limiting the numbers of people on those individual courses, because you don't get, if we rolled it out to 200 people at a time, it wasn't going to get the same impact. You weren't going to get the same engagement. Chris, any further thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question, Ben. So thank you. It's a brilliant question. I found that, so I was fortunate to many of the folks who were in my teams when I was in a corporate life, sat in Asia or sat in different parts of the world. And I spent a number of years there myself. What you discover is that even the way people communicate is totally different, right? So if I ask you, Ben, do you want to do this? And you say yes, in the Western world, that means yes, you do. If I ask someone in Asia and they say yes, that doesn't actually mean yes yet. And I'm not going into the detail of that. Anyone who understands culture and how it works within Asia will kind of get that straight away. But I think understanding the different parts of the world that you're trying to roll it out to is critical. And the only way you get that is really having the understanding of those different parts of the world. That's not something you can just acquire straight away. And then once you do that, Josh's comment about pre-working, co-creation, so that when people finally get the training, they feel like they've been part of creating this. It's not just a drop down on top of them, because frankly, if you just drop something on top of someone, you don't really have a right to succeed. And a lot of the big corporate trainings that happen around the world, they're just a drop down. And that's why there's many elements within them that don't really resonate with people, but they have a certain appeal and they deliver on certain metrics. So I think the first thing is do great pre-work, co-create, but really understand the different cultures, the different business challenges people have globally, and then you've got a really good chance of success.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys.
I have a question for you. So do you think because of COVID and because we've all been working from home and doing this hybrid working, people have maybe forgotten about training? Do you think we're going to see maybe some skill shortages over the next 12 months because training might have lapsed a bit? People are so focused on working and just getting the job done that maybe organizations have maybe lapsed a little bit on delivering training and educating their employees. What's your thoughts on that?
Andrew, do you want to have a go first?
I do think we've seen it as well within BIM Academy, where training itself in academia seems to be, because it's always a flow going through, it's always there and it's present. And even we're getting more and more students coming through and the delivery on a commercial, like more on the construction industry and so on like that. I still think a lot of people are quite hesitant. I think they want to do face-to-face training because it's preferred, so they're still just waiting for this big green light where it's like, everyone, it's gone now, COVID's disappeared, you can go back to normal. So there's still quite a lot that's hesitant, but I do think creating this blended approach does give them options, as I mentioned on the first comment, and I think it's the options that may help them, but they might need a bit of persuasion, but that's what we're here to do.
Well, Chris, any thoughts on that skills gap?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think 100% for sure companies have done less training, right? And rightly so, because, if your tires in your car are flat, you're not worrying about polishing your car, you're worrying about fixing your tires, right? And people have had tires to fix and not had to clean their car. They've had to work out hybrid working, remote working, all this stuff. So definitely there has been less training. I think we're going to see that start to shift now. Already I'm starting to see it shift, where people are getting much more focused on training, which is great, especially if you're on a training company as well. But also what you see is the e-learning market is exploding, right? Now, COVID is part of that, but even before COVID, the e-learning market, as you all know, was expanding dramatically. I mean, depending on the number you look at, it might be $300 billion in 10 years' time per year. So training is happening. There's this sense of going much more online. But if it was my organization, I wouldn't be losing sight of the value of having people in a room talking, just like meeting your family. You know, it wouldn't be great if you only saw your kids online. It's great to be in a room because it really makes a difference to how people learn and what they learn. So try and find that sweet spot where you do a lot of virtual stuff as appropriate and in context for global organizations, etc., that need that. And where you can, you bring people together.
Joss, any further thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I don't disagree. I think there definitely has been a decline, particularly around apprenticeships as well. So I've worked predominantly in construction and creative, and we've seen, I mean, apprenticeships have been, you know, the ones that we had, lots have been made redundant, have been furloughed for a long time and then gone. So there is, you know, there'll be a backlash to that, particularly obviously in the trades-based roles in construction. But then where I think training has picked up in organisations, interestingly, is around the inclusion, diversity and access. And that, I think, has really picked up. I think there's been a load of issues that have come to the forefront over the last 18 months, which has meant that we've needed some really good training around what diversity inclusion means, and it's almost created a space for us to shift and move towards that, which has been really interesting.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again, guys. I think was really interesting. I think there's some fantastic outcomes from that.
I agree. I think for me, I love when Andrew said it's about making memories, and when Josh said it's experiential. You know, you're absolutely right. You've got to have that memorable experience, and I too have had the Freddos, Chris, so thank you. And I think Chris, you said it's forgetting about what's possible and concentrating on what's needed, which I think is absolutely essential. I think you're right. I think we kind of maybe lost track about the value of training in this past 12 to 18 months, and we've really got to concentrate on what value that brings to us, and not just as individuals, but to be more effective and efficient as an organization. So yeah, I think for me this talk's been really enlightening, and thank you to everyone who has joined us. We will email you afterwards with a recording, so please share with your own networks, and we'll send you the report that we talked about at the beginning of the session as well. But yeah, thank you, Chris, thank you, Joss, Andrew, Graham, thank you for sharing. Marvelous job as always, and I think we will see you next time.